The deal was done in silence. No gold, no signatures, just a nod from the foreman, a tied horse, and a girl pushed forward like a sack of unwanted grain. Liza stumbled as her boots caught the dry earth, the sun so bright it bled the world white. Her wrists were bound, her mouth dry, and the men behind her already turning away, eager to forget the transaction. "Half-breed'll keep her in line," one muttered. "Won't kill her, yet." She didn't respond, didn't flinch, just stared at the man they'd traded her to. He was taller than she expected, wrapped in a buckskin coat darker than the dust around him. His face was unreadable, carved from stillness. An Apache, clearly, but not wild. Not cruel, just there, watching her like she wasn't broken yet. He said nothing, took her rope and mounted in one fluid motion, then tugged gently once. She followed. What choice did she have? They rode for hours through heat that cracked her lips, and silence that stretched like a noose. She expected violence. At the next ridge, at the next stop, something. A shove, a sneer, but none came. At dusk, they reached a bluff above a narrow canyon where smoke from a low fire drifted toward the sky. He dismounted, cut her bindings with a single stroke of his knife, and tossed her a canteen without ceremony. "Drink." His voice was deep but calm. She blinked. "Aren't you going to—" He didn't answer, just turned, led his horse down into the ravine, and vanished into the brush. Liza stood there, free of rope but not fear, the canteen sweating in her hand. This wasn't how men handled things. Men took. They didn't walk away. Her heart beat loud in her ears. The last time someone had looked at her that long without touching her, she was still in her mother's house. That had been years. She sat slowly, drank in small sips, and watched the canyon flicker in orange light. Maybe this was the start of something worse. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd been given to a man who didn't see her as property at all. She didn't trust it yet. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was already dead. She found him again by following the scent of wood smoke and the faint trail his boots had pressed into the canyon dust. The fire burned low in a pit surrounded by flat stones, its warmth stretching into the stillness like an invitation with no name on it. The Apache warrior sat on the far side, legs crossed, sharpening a blade slowly against a whetstone. He didn't look up when she stepped into the glow. She hesitated, unsure of what she was allowed to do. "Do I sleep here?" she asked. Her voice sounded too loud in the hush between them. He nodded once, not lifting his eyes. That side. She moved to the edge of the firelight and sat, knees tucked to her chest. Her body ached, not from the ride, but from the months before. Nights without blankets, hands that left bruises, promises broken faster than bottles smashed on saloon floors. She waited for him to speak, to demand, to name the cost of her presence. But none came. When he finished sharpening the blade, he stood, rolled a blanket onto the cold earth beside the fire, but on the far side. Then he lay down with his back to her, shoulders rigid, head tilted just enough to hear any sound she might make. She watched him breathe, slow, controlled, as if he were the one afraid of her. The moon rose, full and pale, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. She flinched. He didn't move. But after a moment he reached without looking and nudged something toward her, a second blanket, folded tight. She stared at it. Then him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He didn't respond, maybe didn't hear, or maybe silence was his answer. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and lay down, the warmth creeping in like a betrayal. She'd been owned before. She'd been caged. But never by a man who refused to touch her, even when no one was watching. That kind of restraint made her chest ache more than cruelty ever had. Sleep took her slowly, but not in fear. For the first time in months, she didn't dream of running. Only of a fire that stayed lit while someone else watched the dark. When Liza woke, the sun was already high and her hands were free. Not just unbound, untouched. No ropes, no threats, no sign she was being watched. The warrior was gone from the campfire, but his horse remained, grazing quietly near the canyon wall. She sat up slowly, heart pounding. Freedom was a trick. She'd seen it used too many times. A door left open just to see if the dog would bolt, and yet there were no traps here, no closed fists, just a half-eaten strip of dried meat left beside the coals and a skin of water propped against a stone. Her stomach growled. She didn't want it to. She didn't want to feel comforted. But she was, and that scared her more than any threat. She ate in silence, listening for movement. Half an hour passed before he returned, carrying a bundle of gathered sage and something wrapped in hide. He glanced at her once, then dropped the bundle beside the fire. "You eat?" "Yes." "Good." He didn't say more, just crouched and began unwrapping what turned out to be roots, peeled, bitter-smelling, but clearly edible. She watched his hands. They were clean, scarred but precise. Not the hands of a raider or a killer. Not like the ones that had shoved her off the back of a wagon 3 weeks ago. "Do you always live like this?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Better than the places you've seen." She stiffened. "You don't know where I've been." "Don't need to. I saw your eyes." That shut her up. He offered her one of the roots, and she took it without thinking. It was foul, but nourishing. She chewed slowly, watching him through narrowed eyes. "What do you want from me?" she asked. His answer came without hesitation. "Nothing you don't choose." That stopped her breath. She had no reply. He stood, picked up the sage, and tossed it onto the fire. Smoke spiraled upward, sweet and sharp. For a moment, Liza forgot how to be afraid. She didn't understand this man, didn't know if she could trust him. But the idea that she might not have to earn her place with obedience or skin made something inside her begin to thaw. She wasn't tied anymore. Not to a stake, not to fear. And that was the first real danger she'd felt in years. The fourth day brought silence, not out of fear, but out of ease. Liza had stopped flinching when his shadow passed near. She no longer watched him from the corners of her eyes like a caged thing waiting for the trap to spring. She still didn't trust him, not fully, but the constant weight in her chest had lightened, if only a little. He taught her how to build a fire from nothing but dried moss and spark rock. He showed her how to walk without leaving tracks, how to listen to the trees, and how to pull water from beneath the canyon floor with a woven reed funnel. "Why me?" she asked once, breaking the quiet. He paused, looked at her like the question made no sense. "You think I chose this?" "Didn't you?" she countered. "They gave me to you." "They tried," he said, "but they don't speak for me." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why didn't you say no?" He crouched, poked the fire gently with a stick, and said, "Because you looked at me like I was a man, not a monster." Her breath caught. She didn't remember that look. She remembered fear. But maybe it had slipped, somewhere in that first moment, before her body remembered what the world had taught her. She looked away. "I wasn't trying to give you anything." "I know." And somehow that made it feel more real. That night they sat beside each other near the fire. He carved small shapes from bone and wood, animals mostly. She watched, fascinated. "You don't speak much," she said. "Words lie," he replied. "Hands don't." She looked at her own, still scraped, still healing, but steadier now, stronger. "What's your name?" she asked. "They called me Hawk. Is that what you call yourself?" He smiled. Small, real, fleeting. "No one asks that." "I just did." He nodded once, didn't answer. But in the flicker of firelight, she realized it didn't matter. He wasn't hiding who he was. He was letting her see it, one layer at a time. Slowly. Willingly. And for the first time since she'd been given away, Liza took a full breath, not stolen, not braced, just hers. Entirely hers. The blade slipped when she wasn't paying attention. Just a moment's distraction while cutting bark for kindling, then blood, bright and sudden, running down her palm. She hissed and dropped the knife. Before she could even curse, Hawk was beside her. Not rushing, not shouting, just there. He crouched low, took her hand in both of his, and turned it upward into the light. His touch was firm but careful, thumbs pressing gently at the base of the wound to slow the bleeding. "It's deep," he said, voice low and even. "You'll need ash to seal it." "Ash?" she asked, swallowing hard. "From last night's fire, mixed with water, stops the bleeding." He didn't wait for permission. Tore a strip from his own shirt, poured water into a carved cup, mixed the ash into a black paste, and smeared it gently across the cut. It stung. She winced. He paused. "Tell me if it's too much." The absurdity of the words made her chest tighten. Too much? She'd been shoved, broken, used. No one had ever asked her that, not once. "It's fine," she said, her voice barely steady. When the ash stopped the bleeding, he wrapped the cloth tight, tied it with a knot so precise it might have been ritual. Then he let her hand go and stepped back, as if the touch had cost him something too. She stared at him. "Why do you do this? Do what?" "Act like I matter." He tilted his head. "You think you don't?" "Not to the men who gave me away." "Then they're smaller than you." She blinked. "What?" "Small men can't hold truth, so they break what threatens them." She stared at the bandage, then at the hands that had tied it. Strong, patient, capable of violence but choosing something else. "Are you going to keep me here?" she asked suddenly. "Like a prisoner?" "No," he said. "You can leave tomorrow, or today." Her heart thudded. She hadn't expected that answer. "Just like that?" He nodded. "I never wanted to own you." She looked down at the cloth, then back up at him. "Then why haven't I run?" He didn't reply. Didn't have to. Because somewhere between fear and firelight, Liza had begun to wonder if freedom wasn't always found in leaving. Sometimes it waited in the one place you'd never choose to be. The dream came soft at first, her mother's voice humming in the kitchen, the scent of cornbread, hands brushing back her hair as she fell asleep on worn quilts. Liza smiled in the dream. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. But then the humming stopped. The fire sputtered, and her mother's hands were cold, too cold, pulling her back, whispering, "It's not real, wake up." Liza gasped and sat upright, sweat slicking her back despite the chill. The canyon was quiet, the fire now just red coals. Hawk wasn't near her, he never was, but the shape of his blanket was visible across the way, unmoving, steady as always. She pressed her bandaged hand to her chest. The wound throbbed, but not from pain. From memory. From the way her mother had vanished when the ranch was raided. From the way no one fought to find her. Liza had been traded between ranches after that, each time a little less hers, a little more silence. But here, in this canyon, wrapped in a blanket she hadn't earned, with food she hadn't begged for and words she didn't have to fear, something was returning. Not her old self, but something new, something with weight. She stood quietly, walked to the edge of the cliff where the moonlight poured silver over the stones, and looked out. It was wild land, unclaimed and endless. It frightened her. It thrilled her. Hawk stepped beside her like a shadow joining its owner. He didn't speak. She didn't look at him, just said, "Do you miss your people?" He didn't answer at first. Then, "I carry them." She turned, confused. "Where?" He placed a hand flat to his chest. "Here, in the silence." She stared at him, 100 questions crowding her throat, but none mattered more than the one that came next. "Do I belong here?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Do you feel caged?" She shook her head. "Then you're free." A tear slipped down her cheek, not from sadness, but because she hadn't known what being free could feel like. He reached up, slow and careful, and wiped it away with the back of his hand. The first time he touched her face. She didn't pull back. For once, she didn't have to wake to someone else's truth. This skin, this moment, this breath, it was finally hers. It was near the end of the second week when she said it. Quietly, like testing a stone across ice. "I want to stay." Hawk didn't lift his head. He was weaving a net from horsehair, each knot precise, deliberate. She watched him, heart pounding like she'd said something dangerous. "I know you said I could leave," she added, "but I don't want to." Still he didn't speak, didn't look at her, just kept tying those knots like the rhythm mattered more than the answer. She felt heat rise in her throat. "Do you want me gone?" No reply, just the faint creak of twine tightening, the crackle of wind through the dry sage. She took a step closer. "You said I could choose. I'm choosing. Doesn't that matter?" He stopped. Let the net fall gently into his lap, then turned his eyes toward her, dark, steady, unreadable. "It matters," he said at last, "but choice doesn't need permission." She blinked. "So I can stay?" He nodded. Once, no smile, no grand gesture, just acceptance, as if she'd said something as ordinary as, "The fire's gone out." But for Liza, it was everything. No one had ever let her choose without consequence, without price. She sat beside him, close enough for their shoulders to brush. He didn't move away. "Will you tell me your real name?" she asked. "Not the one they gave you." He hesitated. "It has no word in your tongue." "Try me." He spoke it softly, just once, a string of syllables that danced like wind across stone. She repeated it back, clumsy but careful. He didn't laugh, just nodded. "It means what?" she asked. "Stone that breaks water." She smiled. "And they called you Hawk?" "Men name what they fear," he said, "not what they fail to understand." She rested her head on his shoulder then, not seeking comfort, but offering it. He didn't move. And in that silence, Liza realized he hadn't answered her with words because he didn't have to. She was already home. Not claimed, not trapped. Just home. The net lay forgotten between them, and for the first time, she felt the world stop pulling. She wasn't being carried anymore. She was standing, on her own. The sound came from behind the ridge, unexpected, sudden, and male. Liza froze, breath caught halfway in her chest, laughter, loud and careless, the kind that once meant danger. Her legs moved before thought caught up, stepping in front of the fire, arms slightly raised. Not in defense, just habit. Hawk appeared beside her like smoke, bow in hand, shoulders tense. "They're passing through," he murmured. "Traitors, no scent of liquor, no fresh blood on the wind." His calm steadied her more than the words. Still, her body trembled. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "You're not going back," he said, not as comfort, but as fact. They waited in the shadow of the canyon wall until the voices faded into distance. When they were gone, Hawk lowered the bow. Liza didn't speak. She turned, walked back to the fire, and sat. Hands still shaking, but her spine stayed straight. No running, no crying, not this time. Hawk joined her after a moment, passed her a strip of dried meat. "You didn't run," he said. "No," she breathed, surprised at herself. "I didn't." He studied her, then nodded. "That's the sound of healing." She stared into the flames. "It still feels like fear. It always does, until it doesn't." The fire popped gently, as if agreeing. Liza tore the meat slowly, her teeth finding rhythm in the chew. "Did you ever run?" she asked. "Once," he said. "A long time ago." "From what?" "The kind of place that teaches men to hurt what they don't understand." She looked at him. Really looked. "And did you find peace?" "No," he said. "I built it." Silence stretched between them again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. They spent the rest of the evening in easy quiet, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. And when she laughed, softly, just once, at the way his net tangled in her hair by accident, he didn't startle, he just smiled. She realized then that her laughter didn't mean danger anymore. It didn't mean someone would come, or take, or punish. It was just hers. And it stayed. Like the fire. Like the man beside her. Like the freedom she hadn't believed she'd ever feel without running. The trader rode in with beads, blankets, and brass buttons, eyes sharp, and a voice too slick to trust. He greeted Hawk in broken Apache and better Spanish, smiling wide as he laid out trinkets across a hide. Liza stayed near the back of the camp, watching from the shadows, her hand resting lightly on the knife Hawk had taught her to keep beneath her boot. The trader's eyes found her. They always did. "She yours?" he asked Hawk in English. "Pretty one, that. Pale but strong. Could fetch 3 horses easy back in Prescott." Liza didn't move. Hawk did, slowly, deliberately, not toward the man, but away. He turned, walked past the trader, past the fire, and stood at the edge of the canyon where the wind carved through stone like time itself. The trader chuckled. "What, no deal? Thought Apache liked trading?" Liza stepped forward then, voice low and cold. "He's not trading me." The man looked her over, surprised. "You speak for him?" "No," she said. "I speak for myself." Hawk didn't turn around, didn't need to. His silence was louder than any threat. The trader spat into the dust, muttered something in Spanish she didn't quite catch, and gathered his wares. He rode off without another word. When he was gone, Liza walked to where Hawk stood. He didn't look at her, just said, "You didn't need me to answer." "I know," she replied, "but I needed to say it." He nodded. They stood in the wind together, not touching, not claiming, just 2 people who had chosen the same place to stand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For walking away." He looked at her then, and in his eyes was the quiet strength that had always been there, not in fists, but in restraint, not in ownership, but in trust. "You were never mine to give," he said. "That's the only kind of freedom that matters." She didn't cry. She'd done enough of that in her old life. Instead, she smiled. Because for the first time, when a man walked away from a deal that involved her, he wasn't abandoning her. He was honoring her. And in that moment, the canyon didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a sanctuary. The rains came early that season, washing the canyon walls clean and painting the sage in deeper greens. Liza stood at the edge of the bluff, arms bare to the drizzle, hair soaked, eyes steady. Behind her, the fire crackled, stew bubbling in the pot she had seasoned without asking. Hawk sat nearby, sharpening a tool, humming something soft and ancient. They didn't speak much anymore. but not because they were afraid, because they didn't need to. That night, she held out the old blanket, the one she'd been given the day he cut her ropes, and laid it over the new bed of reeds they had woven together. Not his side, not hers, just the place they both returned to. "There's no one left to sell me," she said, voice calm. "No one left to trade or silence me. I could leave tomorrow, walk until the canyon disappears and the town forgets I ever lived." He looked up, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "You could, but I won't." She knelt beside him, reached for his hand, and placed her palm over the old scar that ran across his wrist. "Because here," she said, "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." He didn't smile, didn't answer. Just turned his hand so that their fingers wove together, not held tight, just resting. Chosen. Steady. The baby's blanket lay nearby, empty for now but ready. Her body had healed. So had her breath. The nightmares had grown quiet. When she did dream, they were no longer of running, but of planting, of teaching, of hands pressed to her belly and eyes that waited, not demanded. The canyon, once a place of exile, had become something else. Not escape, not hiding, but home. Because freedom, she realized, wasn't the absence of chains. It was the presence of choice. She had been sold like property, but she had stayed like fire stays in stone, burning, unclaimed, impossible to hold. Hawk never said he loved her, never promised anything, but every day he gave her space to be whole. And in that silence, Liza finally heard what love sounded like when it didn't hurt. And when the baby came, he would hear it too, because his mother had been broken and chose to stay unbroken. Not because she was kept, but because she was finally, completely free. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Echoes of the West and tell us in the comments, can silence ever be louder than love?